Good evening, and we welcome you to the Wednesday night Bible class, prayer meeting, and singing. Not just one thing, it's a bunch, right? Along with prayers. So we appreciate those who are here. We appreciate very much those of you who have selected to join us on the internet. We pray that your time spent with us tonight will be valuable, not only now, but eternally. We have several announcements that we want to call to your attention. Terletha's father has COVID and is having a real struggle with it. I believe he's in Nebraska, but Terletha asked us to kindly remember her dad in your prayers. He's about 80 years old. Norma Batista had surgery today, heart catheterization. We don't know yet how she's doing. We haven't had any word, but we pray that she came through that just fine. Also, Linda Miller just lost her last uncle. So let's remember Linda in our prayers. Diane Haley's brother-in-law, Earl Lemons, is in a hospital with blood on his brain. Got a leak somewhere up there, and that can be very, very serious. So let's remember Earl in our prayers. Also, Frida Rose is at home, continuing her recovery from knee surgery, and she's doing pretty good. So let's thank God for that. Carol has been moved to Remington, which is in Richardson, and I can't see her till I get a COVID test cleared. I took the test this morning, and hopefully in a couple of days I'll be able to see her. Can't speak to her on the phone, so if any of you ladies would like to do a good deed, you can call Remington, and I'll put that number in the bulletin, and just visit with her on the phone. She appreciates that so much. In fact, that's the only way I get to visit with her right now. Everybody ready for Bible study? You got your songs ready? Let's sing and then let's study.
Number 420, please. 420. Seems like to be an appropriate song to me. 420. Search me, O God, and know my heart today. Try me, O Savior, know my thoughts, I pray. See if there be some wicked way in me. Cleanse me from every sin and set me free. O Holy Ghost, revival comes from thee. Send a revival, start the work in me. Thy word declares, thou wilt supply our need. For blessing now, O Lord, I humbly plead. Now we'll have our opening prayer.
Let's pray together, please. Dear Lord, we come before you this evening with thanksgiving in our hearts and people on our mind. You know our wants and our desires. You know the people who need our prayers. Watch over those of us or those in the congregation who have lost loved ones in the last several weeks and months. Watch over those who are sick. Bring them back to their much wanted health. Bring them back to us so that we can continue to fellowship with them. Help Park remember what he's going to teach us tonight. Help us be open-minded and open-hearted so that we can learn something from this and take it out into the world as we go forth. All these things I ask in your Son, our Lord's name, I pray. Amen.
This evening, if you'd like to mark our song after we study, will be number 923, please. Number 923 after the lesson. And before, number 509. 509, please. I will sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me, how he left his home in glory for the cross of Calvary. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. I was lost, but Jesus found me, found the sheep that went astray. Threw his loving arms around me, drew me back into his way. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. He will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Then he'll bear me safely over where the loved ones I shall meet. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea.
I've actually got some handouts. Jim or Fernando, could I ask you guys to help some of these out? Okay. All right. Am I on? Good. I think I'm kind of on. All right. And there are more to be had here. Let's see. Did you guys get any? Thank you. Thank you, sir. We've been studying the book of Hosea. So if you're not exactly sure where it is, you might be trying to find it. It's an Old Testament book, comes right after the book of Daniel. And so if you want to be looking that up, why we can get started here pretty quick. And by the way, if it happens to be that you are joining us online and you're noticing that we're handing out some worksheets or whatever you want to call these, and you would like a copy of that, why, please drop me a line at rhill hillchurch@gmail.com, and I would be happy to send you a copy of that online. It'll come to you in a PDF format. So that's rhillchurch@gmail.com. We've already taken a look at the first chapter of the book of Hosea. Part of what we were doing last week was really kind of taking a look at maybe just a little bit of the background to what's going on, but we also wanted to take a look at the situation specifically that causes the, it's kind of the premise of the book, I guess you could say. And the premise of the book, or the basic story, is that God has asked the prophet Hosea to do something really strange. What did he ask Hosea to do? Marry a prostitute. Now, it's worthwhile noting that the word that's used here in Hebrew is not necessarily the one that is always used for a prostitute. That is one who exchanges money for sex. But the word here is actually something a little bit, I don't know, I'm going to use a more modern day translation. A woman of loose morals is kind of what it would really boil down to. Now certainly one who's in prostitution would have that sort of problem as well. But this is specifically not just that she was a prostitute, but specifically that she was just a woman of loose morals. And this was, boy, can you imagine being Hosea and being commanded to go do that? It'd be mind-blowing. But they actually have 3 children. The first one is named Jezreel. And the word Jezreel, you might recall, can actually have 2 different sort of translations. One of them is God sows, and that's a good thing. But the other is God scatters, and that could be a bad thing. And that's probably the meaning of Jezreel in this particular context. That one child, God says, I want you to name him Jezreel, God scatters, because that was what was coming up. Another child was born. This particular child was named Lo Rumah, which is no compassion. Another child was born. This one's named Lo Ami, not my people. God is trying to get something across to Israel, and it's not going to be really pretty. Well, we're starting in chapter 2, so let's kind of read through chapter 2. And actually, you get a bonus tonight. We're going to read chapter 3 too. So, yeah, there we are. Starting verse 1, chapter 2. Say to your brothers, Ami, and to your sisters, Ruhamah, contend with your mother, contend, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. Or I will strip her naked and expose her as on the day when she was born. And I will make her like a wilderness, make her like a desert land, and slay her with thirst. Also, I will have no compassion on her children, because they are children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot. She who conceived them has acted shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers, who give me bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. Therefore, I will hedge up her way with thorns. I will build a wall against her so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. And she will seek them, but not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me than now. For she does not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal. Therefore, I will take back my grain at harvest time, and my new wine in its season. I will also take back my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. And then I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one will rescue her out of my hand. I will also put an end to all her gaiety, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her festival assemblies. I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, these are my wages, which my lovers have given me, and I will make them a forest and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them and adorn herself with earrings and jewelry and follow her lovers, so that she forgot me, declares the Lord. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, and speak kindly to her. Then I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. And she will sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt. It will come about in that day, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, and will no longer call me Bali. For I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, so that they will be mentioned by their names no more. In that day I will also make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, and the creeping things of the ground. And I will abolish the bow, the sword, and war from the land, and will make them lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know the Lord. It will come about in that day that I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they'll respond to the earth, and the earth will respond to the grain, to the new wine, and to the oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. I will sow her for myself in the land. I will also have compassion on her who has not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. Then the Lord said to me, go again. Love a woman who is loved by her husband, yet an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the sons of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a half of barley. Then I said to her, you shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So I will also be toward you. The sons of Israel will remain for many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, and without ephod or household idols. Afterward, the sons of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they will come trembling to the Lord and to his goodness in the last days. Here we're getting an opportunity to see some of the outcome of what has happened and what's about to happen as a result of Israel's spiritual adultery, because that's basically what this is all about. In the end, this particular, visual illustration, I guess, is about Israel coming to grips and coming to an understanding of what is really going on in God's heart whenever he sees not just sin, but what are some of the other things that he mentions here that apparently really strike at his heart? What are some of the things he mentions here? What was that? They're looking to other gods. That's what they're doing. And they are saying regarding these other gods, they are the ones that have given me the flax and the wool. They're the ones that have given me the oil and the wine. They're the ones that have been giving me my bread. And the real God is going, what? What? You thought that they were giving you these things? Well, I think I can fix that. And that's what he's intending on doing. But it's these going to the other gods. It's about forgetting God. It is also about, remember we talked about there were two really important words that we didn't want to make sure we didn't forget whenever we're reading the book of Hosea. One of those words is what? To know. To know. And the other word is sometimes translated loving kindness. In other cases, it's compassion or even mercy, but it's the word chesed, and it's the word in Hebrew for love, but not just any old kind of love. It's about covenant love, which is really very important. We end up seeing those words crop up many, many times in the book of Hosea. I hope you noticed a couple of times when we noted the word or read the word no, that was something that we needed to pay attention to, because it's talking about not just some sort of head knowledge, it's talking about relational knowledge, close relational knowledge. And so it's really important for us to understand that and know that God, whenever he was taking a look at the behavior of Israel, that he is hurt not just because of the sinfulness, but because of the spiritual adultery that's going on. This is what it's really about. And this comes through really kind of loud and clear here. Starting in chapter 2 and verse 1, he notes here, he's talking to Ami, and he's also talking to Ruhamah. And you might remember these names mean something. Word Ami means my people. But notice in chapter 1, what was the full name? Lo Ruhamah, Lo Ami. And Lo means no. Good, you guys are getting Hebrew. All right, here we go. It means no compassion, not my people. That's what he's making. But here, he's saying to your brothers, Ami, and to your sisters, Ruhamah, contend with your mother rather, contend, for she is not my wife. What happened to the low part here? And why has he dumped that particular part? Exactly so. Exactly so. And for what remnant might have been that were still loyal to God, what is he asking them to do? Make an appeal. Make an appeal. Help them to turn it around. That's kind of what he's talking about, because who are they to contend with? Your mother, which basically is Israel, right? She is not my wife. I'm not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face. What does that mean? When you got something in your face, it becomes really obvious to you, right? It's right there. And put away your harlotry from between your breasts. What might that be making reference to? Well, there is that, but it's also when something is like right here. Oops, I hit the mic. Sorry. When something is right here, I mean, it's really intimate and a part of you. It's in your heart, as it were. And so he's saying, put away all this idolatry from your face and this harlotry put away the harlotry from between your breasts that's so close to you. Put away this idolatry that has become part and parcel of who you are. Stop it. Turn. Be my people again. Or, he says, I will strip her naked and expose her as on the day when she was born. Now, that has an obvious mental picture there, right? Where someone is coming out of the womb and they have like 0 on, okay? But there's something a little bit deeper than that. When was it that Israel was considered to be, quote unquote, born? Way back in Egypt. I will strip you bare as in the day that you were born. What were they in Egypt? They were slaves. And guess what's about to happen to them again? It's exactly what's about to happen to them again. It's really important for us to kind of get that. I will make her like a wilderness, he says. Make her like a desert. Slay no compassion, verse 4, on her children, because they are children of harlotry, he says. This appeal that he is making is one that obviously is trying to get her to to return, because he says, you know, I rescued you. In other places in Scripture, it talks about how God kind of considers, and this is kind of coming out of Ezekiel, God kind of considered his adoption of Israel as being very much like an adoption. You were a child, as it were. He says that apparently nobody wanted, and I chose you. You still had blood and amniotic fluid on you. I cleaned you up, and I made you something special. He talks about it that way. But then you turned on me. The book of Ezekiel talks about how you turned on me and that kind of thing. But the idea basically is the same. God rescued Israel from slavery, and what he's talking about here is when he talks about no compassion on the children, is apparently that is exactly what was going to happen to them again. And the reason why? Well, let me ask you this question. What was Gomer, or Israel, apparently interested in? Prosperity or relationship? Apparently prosperity, right? That's what she was mostly interested in. Which, after a fashion, almost kind of to your point, Jim, almost does kind of make her a prostitute, doesn't she? She was just there for what she could get out of it, I guess. And what he's trying to get across to her is that is not the point here. It needs to be about relationship. And by the way, yeah, Jim?
It appears to me that Israel's infidelity to God is so rich in this idolatry. You have a true God, and yet probably has a wife. Like she has a true husband.
Mm-hmm.
She's always after somebody else. Israel was the same.
Yeah.
And I think the message is again and again, I'm going to cure you of that.
Yeah. And it's not going to be an easy cure.
But I will cure you.
Yeah, I'll cure you, but it won't be an easy cure. You're right. You know, you can certainly understand what some of the process might end up being, and I think that's an important thing for us to kind of consider. You know, when Israel came out of Egypt, wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, came into the land of Canaan, did they wipe out all the Canaanites? The answer is no. They didn't. And as they're living around all these Canaanites, eventually, what did happen? I mean, God warned them about it. If you leave any Canaanites alive, you know what's going to happen. You're going to intermarry with them, and what's going to happen? They're going to corrupt you. It's just the way it's going to work. Did that happen? Yep. And in understanding or trying to get into the head of why these things occurred, the ancient world had the tendency to think, of course it's not true, but they had the tendency to think that the land had its own God. And if you moved in from out of state, as it were, and moved into that country, that you were sort of obligated to at least give a tip of the hat to the God of the land. Well, you can see this sort of thing happening back, actually, not too long after Hosea lives. Israel ends up going off into Assyrian captivity, but the Assyrians didn't leave the land empty. They actually drew in a lot of other people that were from the Fertile Crescent and relocated them in Israel. And well, what happened essentially is that God was not particularly pleased with them repopulating because they weren't worshiping him or anything else along it. So he sent in lions and animals, and they were basically, well, they made an appeal to the king of Assyria. They said, we need to know how to worship the God of the land. So please send us some Israelite priests to teach us something about how all that works so that we won't be eaten by these beasts all the time. Well, that's exactly what the king of Assyria did. And that ends up being, by the way, the beginning of the Samaritans, because they ended up starting to worship the God of Israel. Now, they also ended up worshiping their own gods too, but they were worshiping the God of Israel. I just use that as an illustration to say, when Israel came into Canaan, what do you suppose they also thought? Well, yeah, we worship Yahweh, But, Baal is the god of the land. And if we want our crops to grow, if we want our flocks to increase, if we want our herds to increase, if we want prosperity, then it's probably worthwhile to kind of, buy insurance. Let's worship the God of the land and we'll be prosperous. Which essentially is this same idea and principle here, that even Gomer was interested in what? Prosperity. Not necessarily a relationship. And what God has been calling upon his people to have with him all down through history is relationship. Yeah, I know that you know about me, but I want you to know me. Because knowing someone, and by the way, I used the illustration the other day, again, of your son who was having this conversation with a foster son that you had? That it's we have to think about what we're contemplating doing, how that's going to affect mom and dad. Why? Because your son had that relationship with you, whereas the foster child did not. And you see, whenever we really have a relationship with God, suddenly sinning becomes a different thing. Suddenly being disloyal to God becomes a different thing because of the relationship. And that's what God has been trying to get his people to have for all the history of Israel and even down to the present day. He wants his people to have a relationship with him. That's what he's calling upon us to have. Well, if we're not careful, however, it is worthwhile noting that it is quite possible for us, even in the 21st century, to be focused far more on prosperity and what God can bless us with than we are in relationship with him. I think there's a really important point there that we need to be, because we live in a very prosperous land. And if we're not careful, before long, we can really get wound up around the axle on how my education has given me all the things I've got, how my college degree has, how my intelligence has, how the skills that I happen to have. Look at all that stuff that this has given to me. When the truth of the matter is, who gave you the skills, by the way? God did. Who gave you opportunities, by the way? Well, God did. Who allowed you to even be born in this country? Well, God did, with all the opportunities that go along with it. I'm going to get to this. I'm kind of giving away my devotional thought for this evening as we kind of will draw to a close. But that's one of the reasons I love Thanksgiving. And I think that we need to, this really needs to be, I know it's a Christian holiday after a fashion, but I mean, it really needs to be a Christian holiday, because it's unfortunately one of the few times of the year that we really set aside to just think about all that God has given to us. And that's just in the physical realm, let alone the spiritual realm. And it's really so important, I think, is something that really does have some application here as we're taking a look at Hosea. Well, of course, Gomer, Israel, did believe that her prosperity was coming from where? From Baal, Asheroth, any of the other gods, name them. And these lovers that are being referred to here, in fact, are those very gods. The lovers represented to her prosperity. This is how I can get what I want. This is how I can get what I want. And so she was all about that. But I'm going to fix it, as you were making mention. I'm going to fix that. We're going to make this so that it doesn't happen anymore. He notes here about hedging her in, right? I'm going to hedge her in, build a wall. And if he does that, is it going to be possible for her? The answer, of course, would be no. So what exactly is God's end game here? Yeah. it's really important to, in this story and maybe even in stories, to understand that sometimes God doesn't discipline just because he's God and he can, but he does so very specifically because in many cases he's trying to win us back to him. This is what was going on with Israel in the Assyrian captivity. As horrible as it was, this was the end game. God wasn't punishing them just because he could, wasn't punishing just because he was, I don't know, sadistic or something. This was his attempt to try to win them back by showing them for the first time in a really long time who it was that really was the source of all of their blessings, who it was that really was truly loving them and was loving them despite the fact that they had been disloyal, despite the fact that they had broken covenant, despite the fact that they didn't really know God at all. That was God's end game. God had really given the food to eat, the clothes to wear, the drink for thirst, all the riches. God had done all of that, not the gods that they were bowing down to. But what Gomer had done, what had Gomer done? What had Israel done with it? Worship Baal with it. I've given you all this grain, I've given you the wine, I've given you the gold and the silver, and what have you done with it? Turned around and given it over to what were not gods at all. Really? That'd be a little bit like my wife taking all my Christmas gifts and giving it to somebody else. What? That's the idea that's behind this and why it's so hurtful and why it's so painful and why actually the reason that God asked this incredible thing of Hosea is because he wanted that pain to be really palpable to Israel who was listening to it, who couldn't identify with a situation like this, how hurtful it would be, how painful it would be. And that's the very reason why it is that this illustration in Hosea's life has happened. When God takes back the harvest, the wine, and the clothing, clearly she's going to be without anything at all. Uncovering lewdness certainly would be a dishonor or shame to anyone, and that is what he is threatening to do, and not just threatening. I mean, he's actually prophesying. This is exactly what is going to be happening to you. And I'm down in verse 10 by this point, by the way. But would anyone run to Israel's aid in all of this? No. No one would. God had given them feasts and new moon celebrations and Sabbaths for the purposes of remembering God's blessings. But now he's saying there's not going to be any blessings to celebrate. It's just going to be that empty. Gomer, Israel, thought that the fertility cults, which would be Baal and Asheroth, had given the generous fruit of the earth, but now Israel was about to find out that the Lord all along, the husband God had been unfaithful to, was the real source of all those things. What's even worse, they'd forgotten him. It now just wasn't just a matter of they didn't know him. They'd just forgotten him, which is even more painful still. Just forgotten him. I think it's, and someone help me out, I think it's in the book of Isaiah. It's either Isaiah or Jeremiah, where the prophet talks about, how can a bride forget all of her adornments, her earrings, and all this other sort of stuff, and yet you have forgotten me day after day after day after day. A terrible thing indeed. to be forgotten. But of course, starting in verse 14, God's plan was, again, to allure her, bring her in the wilderness, and speak kindly to her. What do you suppose this wilderness thing is all about? What is he really referring to? What was that again? I didn't hear all of it. Well, I think there is that, but I think very specifically the wilderness he's making reference to is probably the Assyrian exile. You're going to be, I'm bringing you out to the wilderness. There's not going to be anything. It's going to be harsh. It's going to be horrible. And indeed it was for the entire time that Israel was in Assyrian captivity. I think we made reference last time to the throne rooms of the kings of Assyria. Man, it was macabre. It was awful. Beheadings, people, heads on pikes, people cutting off hands and dismembering others, and throwing other people onto stakes, and all kinds of things were going on in these pictures on the wall. And these people, I was reading someone today, the only virtue that the Assyrians seemed to have was courage. There was no compassion. There was no kindness. There was no quarter given. They were about violence. They were about greed. They were about taking whatever they could take. And that is who God was giving them over to because of their sin. Now, by the way, it is worthwhile noting that God didn't go from here all the way over to here in one fell swoop. Down over the centuries, as Israel had continued to wander away, what had God done? Just ignored it? A lot of times, there were other kingdoms that had come in and conquered pieces of them. There had been other times when there had been famine, where there had been locust, where there had been all kinds of other kinds of problems. And each time, the prophets tell us, this isn't just happenstance. It has everything in the world to do with how you've been behaving and what you haven't done, and this lack of knowledge that you continue to try to maintain. So all this time from the very beginning, God had been trying to tell them, look, you've got to come back to me. You've got to come back to me. You've got to come back to me. And how well had it worked? Zip, zero, nada. So now what was God left with? He wasn't just coming down with a hammer. He was coming down with a sledgehammer. That's what he was coming down with. And that's what was going to be happening. This was going to be their wilderness. But even this wilderness was going to have a real purpose, right? Verse 15 says, "Then I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope." Anybody remember what Achor was about? The valley of Achor. When I mentioned the people that are involved in it, you'll go, oh, yeah, I knew that. This is about the story of Achan. This is about the story of Achan. Remember, the story of Achan starts with Israel taking the city of Jericho. And because the city of Jericho was the first fruits, as it were, of Israel conquering the land, God said, then I don't want man, woman, or child alive. And in fact, you can't even take the spoils. Burn everything. The only thing that you're not gonna burn is stuff that won't burn anyway. Silver and gold and whatever jewels you have, and that's not going to go into your personal pocket. That's going to go to the tabernacle, because this is being offered to God as a sacrifice. But of course, what did Achan do? He found some goodies and said, "Oh, they'll never miss this." So he stashes them away and puts it in his own tent underneath the rug, and in hopes that no one finds out about it. But of course, they do find out about it, and And what happens, well, I keep popping, I'm not sure why. But in any case, what happened whenever they discovered who had done this? Well, first of all, they got defeated at Ai, right? That was the problem. And so they were wondering, well, why, God, did this happen? Well, because you took some of the stuff you shouldn't have taken. Well, who was it? And they end up ultimately finding it was Achan. Well, what happened to Achan? He and his entire family were put under the ban. You know what the ban is, right? The ban is kill it, burn it, it belongs to God. That's what the ban is. And one of the big mistakes that Achan made, we may say, well, what did his family do? Anytime that something that was under the ban was touched, the person who touched it now was under the ban. His mistake was trying to hide all those goodies, as you were making reference to, in his tent under the rug, so that all of his family touched it. And so all of them had to be sacrificed in that sense. But his point is that what happened to Israel after Achan's sin was avenged. Israel had an unbroken string of victories all through Canaan. It was all fixed. So what is he talking then about when he says there is the valley of Achor is going to be associated with what? Hope. What hope is there in the valley of Achor? It'll fix the problem. This will fix the problem. And that is what he's talking then about here, that this is what where the real hope was going to be. And when were the days of Israel's youth, as it's mentioned here? When were the days of Israel's youth? We talked about when she was born. When was she born? In Egypt. So when would be the days of her youth? In the wanderings, yeah, in the wanderings and potentially in the conquest and so forth, right? And so he's saying here that that this would be she will sing there is in the days of her youth. Can you remember a time whenever Israel sang? Yeah, on the other side of the Red Sea. Yeah. He's saying it's going to be like that after all this is said and done. That's exactly what he's talking about here. As in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. It'll come about in that day, he says, declares the Lord, that you will call me Ishi, and you won't call me Baal anymore. Kind of need to know a little bit about Hebrew here. Anyone have any idea what Ishi means? What's that? Husband. My husband. Anyone know what Bali means? Actually, if you pronounce it Hebrew-wise, it's Baali. You have to kind of put a hiccup in there, you know. My Baal, or specifically my master. You're going to call me my husband and not my master. What's the difference? Relationship. There's that theme again. Relationship. That's what the Lord was looking for. You will call me Ishi and not Baali anymore. I'll remove the names of the Baals from her mouth so that they will be mentioned by their names no more. And that certainly, thank you for the bell, whoever rang the bell. We will go ahead and we will put a pin in here, kind of draw a line, as it were, and we'll kind of finish this up next time. But I did want to, kind of going back to this idea that I had earlier about the main message of Hosea being about how deeply grieved and painful our sin gives God, how choosing other gods, forgetting the true source of our blessings, has always been heartbreaking to God. And about how it is that indeed we do need to count our blessings. Thanksgiving is only a few days away at this point, but the Christian needs to constantly be remembering his blessings. all the time. Because not only have we been blessed to be living in America, but even more than that, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are in America and enjoying those blessings. But we've been blessed far beyond all of that by having heard the gospel of Christ. How blessed we are. And that sense of blessing ought to cultivate our love and the relationship that we have for the Lord. So that instead of simply calling him our master, we might, in a sense, then call him Ishi, my husband. This evening, though, in thinking about the relationship that you have with God, if perhaps it's occurred to you that maybe that relationship is not as strong as it needs to be, well, there is a solution for that, and it starts right here in the heart. You can write exactly where you sit, change your heart, and change your life. But if it happens to be this evening you would like to have prayers of the congregation here, we stand ready to pray with you and for you. And if it happens to be this evening that you are not yet a Christian, we want to encourage you. Have the relationship with Jesus that you need to have. Place your faith in him. Repent of your sins. Confess him as Lord. Be immersed in water in the name of Jesus Christ so that you can spend eternity with him. This evening, if you have need to respond, we encourage you to come forward while we stand and sing the song together.
923. I hear thy welcome voice that calls me, Lord, to thee, for cleansing in thy precious blood that flowed on Calvary. I am coming, Lord, coming now to thee. Wash me, cleanse me in the blood that flows on Calvary. Thank you, brother, for the time and preparation as we continue to study in the Old Testament. I wonder if there are announcements that need to be made. Remember, everyone that we hear about, times are pretty tough out there again. So as the COVID continues to raise its ugly head, let's be sure and remember all those in our prayers. Also want to be reminded of our Bible study tomorrow night. Everyone's welcome. Starts at 7 o'clock next door. If there's nothing else and all hearts and minds are clear, let's turn to number 539. And we'll sing the first verse of this song, and then we'll be dismissed in prayer. 539. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege that's been ours to be here tonight to open your book. We just pray that we will learn from studying your word, and especially may we let the lesson from Hosea sink in, that the things that we do, those things that are sinful, those things that you have let us know that are displeasing to you, that when we do those things, We break your heart. When we do those things, we impact not only our present, but our future as well. Father, we've heard so many say that what a difficult year 2020 has been thus far. And we do know many in our number are suffering from the loss of loved ones. They're suffering from health issues. They're suffering from financial losses. But may we never forget, Father, that you love us and that these things come from you, that all good things come from above. We just pray that you would help each of us, Father, to encourage one another, to pray for one another, to have hope, not only of a life with you after this one has ended, but that you will provide the things that we need in this life if we seek first God's kingdom and its righteousness. Bless those that are suffering. Help us to encourage. Help us to share. Help us to do whatever we can to make life easier for other individuals. And especially help us, Father, in sharing the gospel with those that do not know Jesus. Please bless our nation. Bless those that put their lives in jeopardy for our benefit. And please forgive us our sins is our prayer in Jesus' holy name. Amen.